by introducing Mr. Colonel Gautam Khote. So, Colonel Gautam Khote is retired army officer born in Pune. All he ever wanted to do is to become a pilot and fly in air. He joined the National Defence Academy Pune in June 1984. After passing out from Indian Military Academy at Dehradun, he was commissioned in 129 Air Defence Regiment in 88. In 1993, he went for the Army Aviation Course and was awarded with Flying Badge. He had flown about 4,000 hours in Jammu and Kashmir, UP, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Bhutan, North Bengal, Rajasthan, and Maharashtra. I think this list will not end. He also had an opportunity of participating in Kargil War, which is known as Operation Vijay in 1999, where he was awarded by Veer Chakra for gallantry in the face of enemy. After being approved for the rank of colonel, he commanded 105 Air Defence Regiment from June 2007 to December 2008 in Madhopur area in Punjab, with a major role in counter-insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir and nearby areas. He was posted in Headquarters Southern Command, Pune. After 22 years of long service to Indian Army, he took premature retirement from Army and now he is pursuing passion of flying by flying helicopters for a corporate based in Pune. Welcome to live session, sir. We are here all looking forward to hear about you, your regiment, and of course, untold stories of war, which makes us understand about how Indian soldiers and officers are mark of ultimate courage and bravery.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So by now we all know and have heard many times from you that you are passionate about flying since your childhood days, adolescence days. Apart from that, what made you think of taking career in Indian Army?
So when I was in my sixth grade or sixth standard as they used to call it, I visited the National Defence Academy because one of my cousin's husband was posted there. And it really, I was completely floored by the National Defence Academy and my brother-in-law who was a fighter pilot, his lifestyle. And at that moment, I think I decided that if ever I want to do anything in life, I want to be a pilot. And in fact, since he was in the NDA, he also took me for a glider ride, which really changed my perspective of looking at the world. Whereas till then, I was just looking from the ground up. At that moment, I got an opportunity to look from top to bottom, to the people on the earth. And that really made my decision to become a pilot very firm. And after I studied hard, I was someone like most of the people audience here. I was from a civilian background, without a middle class family, without any much guidance or without any relatives in the armed forces other than my brother-in-law. I worked hard and I studied hard after my 10th and during my 10th, and after my 11th, I joined the National Defence Academy. And 3 years of training in the National Defence Academy, I passed out, went to the Indian Military Academy, and in June 88, as you rightly brought out, I was commissioned in the Army.
Yes, sir.
And I think I spent 22 years in the Army, and after that 10 years I've been flying. And I think I never ever felt that I made a wrong decision.
Yes, sir. Once the passion pursued, you will never leave it. That's what the people say. So you mentioned about your Army Corps that you belong to. So please tell the audience of this session today about the responsibilities of your regiment, like what they are supposed to do in Army, and about 2 different Army Corps that you have served in.
Okay, I will do that. A lot of people outside do not know that the Army has its own small air force, it's called the Army Aviation. The Army Aviation consists of different types of helicopters which are used for different purposes. Till the time I served, that is during the 1999 Kargil War, we had only 2 types of helicopters. There were the light utility helicopters, which were the Cheetah and Chetak. The Cheetah was used primarily in the high altitude areas, which was because it had more power and it could carry some weight in the high altitude. And the Chetak was used as a utility helicopter in the plains, that is in Rajasthan, Punjab, and other low-lying areas. And the cheetah was used in high altitudes in Siachen, in Kashmir, in Sikkim, in the Chinese borders along in Uttarakhand and Arunachal Pradesh and the northeast. Because it was the only helicopter at that time which was capable of flying at so high altitudes and landing at such places which are like in Siachen and in Kargil, the heights range from 17th and Sikkim. The altitude for landing ranges from 17,000 to 20,000 feet, 21,000 feet. Just for your information, just to remind all of you, Mount Everest is 28,800 feet. So just about 9,000 feet short of Everest. So these are the two types of helicopters that were there in the Army aviation. As you all know, the Air Force consists of fighter aircraft, transport aircraft and helicopters. Their role is more at a national level. The role of Army aviation is more for and in support of the Army, close support of the Army, which is actually doing the fighting. The troops which are actually fighting on the borders or anywhere else, like in insurgency areas, wherever the battle is going on, where the army is battling the militants, to go there, help them, help the people who are fighting in terms of carrying more manpower, food, water, ammunition, and also evacuating our people who are injured. So if you evacuate our own soldier, a soldier who's injured, immediately the moment or within 15-20 minutes or half an hour of his getting injured, his chances are far more higher if you evacuate him by helicopter to a nearest hospital, which may be about 50, 60 kilometers or 70 kilometers, which would take about 3 or 4 hours by road. If you take him by helicopter, it will just take him about 50 minutes or half an hour. His chances of survival are extremely enhanced. So a Jawan who's fighting or an officer who's fighting against militants or in war, he knows that if he gets hurt, in the next 15 to 20 minutes, he is going to be evacuated and taken to the hospital if he gets injured. His morale or his mental state is much better than what it is if he knows that if he gets injured, he's going to lie down and bleed to death. So this is what my Army aviation was. Similarly, in the Navy, you also have the naval aviation, which is in close support of the Navy. So one should not, there's a difference of the role between the Army aviation and the Air Force. The Air Force has this major role to play. The Army aviation has its own role to play in support of the Army, close support of the Army. It does not mean that the Air Force does not help the Army or support the Army. Air Force also does support the Army, but in a different way. I hope I have been able to explain this.
Yes, sir. Yeah, this is what we wanted. The information which you gave, right, is known to many. Thank you for sharing with us. Now that you are commissioned as an officer in the Corps of Army Aviation, I understand the whole unit is for mobilization and for ready for war situation anytime. Have you ever thought that you would get opportunity to contribute to a war situation?
Okay. When I joined the NDA, I joined with extremely high levels of motivation. I was extremely motivated to serve my motherland. And like all of us who were there at that time, who were barely 16 or 16 and a half years of age, were all prepared, extremely motivated, so motivated that we were also always prepared to die for the country if required. So when I joined the army, when I got commissioned in the army, and then I went for the army aviation, I was always hoping that if the army has trained us so hard and so well, so I was always hoping that in case the nation requires me and there's a war going on, I should not be left out. I always felt that I should always be where the war is. It should not happen that there's a war and I'm passing some papers or I'm just passing doing some normal work in 1,000 kilometers away from the battle zone. What will I tell my friends and my relatives? That I joined the army and when the war was there, I was just not available for the country, or I was just passing papers or writing some stupid papers, pushing papers as they say.
I think we lost Nehal. Just
Yeah.
let me check.
Anybody else? You can ask me any questions. I could.
Just a moment, sir.
Okay, since there's nobody, I'll just tell you about the Kargil war, for which today we are celebrating the Operation Vijay. Today's Vijay Divas of the Kargil war. So all of us know what it was. So let me just tell you, for those people who are not really completely aware of what it was. The Pakistanis intruded into our country in the Kargil sector, which was about 200 kilometers to the north of our country, which was 200 kilometers wide. All of them had come about 10 to 15 kilometers at some places 20 kilometers into our boundary. And the Pakistanis said that they are not our soldiers, but they are motivated Kashmiri soldiers, Kashmiri Mujahideen, or as we would call them, terrorists, who are independent Kashmiri people who have come and risen to fight against the Indian army, which was absolutely wrong and which was a false news, which was later proved when we had captured these people and killed so many of them, and when we recovered their military documents, various letters, their identity cards, various Pakistan army issue ammunition, the guns and weapons used by the Pakistani army. So that started somewhere on end of May. It was confirmed that the Pakistanis had intruded and we decided to fight. It took us a month, the whole of June, and till 25th of July to fight the Pakistanis, where we lost 500 brave soldiers, and a number of our soldiers were injured. Finally, on 26th of January, Pakistan accepted the ceasefire unconditionally. They laid down their arms and surrendered to us in the Kashmir sector and agreed to withdraw from there. So that is why the day of ceasefire, when Pakistan surrendered their arms and accepted their defeat, is known as Kargil Divas or Operation Vijay Divas. That was 26th of July 1999. Today, 26th of July 2020, we are celebrating the 21st Vijay Divas of Operation Vijay. That was the war in Kargil.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Today,
Hello, sir. Good evening. This is Pratima. I have a question for you, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I have heard in many stories that those peaks were very narrow and it was very difficult to climb. So how did you guys manage to carry the? And I also heard that it went for more than 2.5 days or 3 days of war, the continuous war. So how did you manage to get your food, ammunitions, and everything, sir?
Okay. So the battles that were fought. So you could understand that assuming a building is a mountain and skyscraper building consisting of 100 floors is a mountain, and on the 100th floor are the enemies who have come and occupied it, and you are on the ground floor. Similar was the situation where the ground floor was already at 10,000 feet. Okay, that was Dras, the general area of Dras and Kargil. The altitude there is 10,000 feet above mean sea level. That means almost 3,000 meters above the sea level. So and for your information, about 11,000 feet, there are no trees. So fighting at such high altitudes involved going through climbing rocks where there were no trees, there's tremendous less oxygen, there is no place to, the enemy who's sitting on top can easily see you. It's like climbing 100 floors going up all the time, knowing the people are on a 100th floor can see you and can throw stones at you. And the stone is going to come and hit you. So it was an extremely difficult situation where the people had to go and fight. And climbing this 100 floors was, I'm just giving an example to make it understandable. You have to carry your own food, you have to carry your water, you have to carry your personal weapon, you have to carry your ammunition, go there and fight. And if anybody of you have been to Leh, which is also at 10,000 feet, you will realize that at Leh, even walking without anything on the first day is a big task in itself. So you have to be well acclimatized. You have to have your tremendous level of motivation to go up, climb up, fight, and win.
Yes, sir, we understand that.
Yeah, I have been to Leh, sir. I know, like you feel very breathless when you
Yeah,
even when you walk. Even when you
that is
walk, you
only at
feel
10,000 feet. That is
yeah.
only at 10,000 feet. This is your
Huh.
starting to fight, starting to climb at 10,000 feet, going to 15,000 feet, 16,000 feet, and then fighting the enemy.
Hmm.
And when you're going towards there is nothing, there's no place to hide, there are no trees, there are no buildings, there's nothing. It's
Yes.
absolutely plain. You're just hiding behind huge rocks and boulders, traveling at night. There are no roads, there are no tracks. You're climbing one step at a time. So climbing 5,000 feet high would take about 48 hours, maybe more sometimes. And then you have not achieved, like mountaineers climb up and then they have achieved their peak. For the army soldiers, they had to go to 15,000 feet, 16,000 feet, 20,000 feet, and then go and fight. So it was a huge task by itself,
It's a challenging, very challenging.
extremely challenging.
So, sir, you were mainly involved in flying the aircrafts in those areas.
I was only involved in flying the helicopters in this aircraft. So if you want, I can tell you.
Yeah, please tell us, sir, what was the tasks that you were assigned and how could you do those in that area and in that weather?
Okay. So this question and your previous question on how you felt when you were going to war, I'll combine this and try to make a nice small answer.
Yes,
You have to tell me when your time is up so that I will stop.
we want to hear it. So continue, sir.
Okay. So it so happened that I had finished my 2.5 years of, almost 3 years of flying in Srinagar, Kashmir, fighting militancy and flying in support of our army, which was fighting insurgency in Kashmir. That every day was very challenging because we used to fly at very low altitudes, and in case there were any militants, they could easily have fired at us and shot us down. So for 2.5 years, I was doing this. And after 2.5 years in 97, I came on posting to Bareilly. So Bareilly was supposed to be a very prized posting. It was a beautiful, nice Mofussil town of India, a typical Mofussil town of India. And I went there with my family because Srinagar, again, I was without my family. It was a forward area. And in Bareilly, I was with my family and enjoying my 2.5 years there. And suddenly in June, end of May 99, we came to know that the Pakistanis have come inside Kargil and there is likely to be a war. At that time, I remember very distinctly, I was at the swimming pool in the army cantonment, swimming with my wife and children. And there I was telling my wife that there's a war there may be a war taking place. And if I remain in Bareilly and I don't go to war, I will be ashamed of myself.
Yes.
And it was luckily for us, on 2nd or 3rd of June, we got our orders to move to Kashmir for fighting the war. So since I was on 5th of June, we flew from Bareilly. In our flight, we were a flight of, I was in 23 recon observation flight of the Army Aviation. We were a flight of 5 helicopters with 10 pilots. We flew from Bareilly to Kashmir, and our ground staff, our engineers and technicians and our all equipment, which was flown by the Indian Air Force aircraft to Srinagar. So we reached in...
Aviation headquarters is in Srinagar, is it?
No. The base, Army Aviation base was in Srinagar. The headquarters are in Delhi. So initially we were supposed to go to Srinagar because all the operations were controlled from Srinagar.
Okay.
The operations in Kargil were controlled from Srinagar because that was the Army Aviation base, nearest Army Aviation base. They were controlled from the Army Aviation base at Srinagar as well as the Army Aviation base in Leh. So we were asked to move to Leh. On 10th of June, I did my first flight, and that was the day I became a major. I was a captain till then. On 11th of June, I became a captain. On 10th of June, one day before that, I did my first flight from Srinagar. I took off and went into the war zone. And when I saw those hills, the first thought that came to my mind, they were all snow-covered peaks, and it was so much, so daunting. So the mountains are so humongous. The first thought that came to my mind is, oh my God, how are we going to fight here? It's going to be so difficult. It's it was really scary in terms of that the amount of effort the army is going to have to put in, the amount of dedication our jawans and officers are going to have will be required to have, and we have no choice. We have to throw those Pakistanis out because they have entered our country, and we have no choice.
Yeah.
Like in the Lord Tennyson's.
Locating enemy bunkers would be very difficult in snow.
Not really that. Reaching there will be very difficult.
Reaching was to be, as in weather.
Reaching there, because you have to go up, climb up so high.
Yeah.
Anyone who's seen the Himalayas,
Yeah.
the real Himalayas, the greater Himalayas, will realize that the mountains are so big. They're so big and they're so daunting. They're so intimidating. So that was the first thought that came to my mind. But then another thought came to my mind that we have no choice but to attack the Pakistanis and throw them out of our country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how could you continue, sir? Then you reached
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll tell you then after that, there were already about 25 helicopters in Srinagar. We were 5 more, so 30, and there were about 20 helicopters in Leh, of the army aviation I'm talking. Besides that, there were Air Force fighter aircraft, there were Air Force helicopters doing their own specific job.
Yeah.
And the job for this 50 helicopters which were there in Kashmir, that is in 30 in Srinagar and 20 in Leh, the job was to support the helicopters in Leh. Out of the 20 helicopters in Leh, 15 were used for Siachen. So actually there were only 5 helicopters available for the war in Kargil, and 5 helicopters from Kargil and about 20 helicopters from Srinagar, because other 10 were utilized for the operations which were going on in Kashmir, the anti-militancy operations which were going on in Kashmir, the 10. So there were about 20 to 25 helicopters which were dedicated, army aviation helicopters which were dedicated for the war which was going on in Kargil. So our helicopters, the helicopters that we had at that time were the Cheetah helicopters. A Cheetah helicopter is a very small helicopter. It can carry 2 people, 2 pilots in front, and there are seats for 3 people. But in such high altitudes, the carrying capacity of the helicopter is vastly reduced. The carrying capacity is vastly reduced. So there was at times we could carry just 1 soldier along with his luggage. So maybe our carrying capacity on most days was about 100 to 120 kilos. 100 to 120 kilos per helicopter. So that is what.
With such limitation.
So we could carry 1 person who was full. Sorry.
Yeah, with such limitation, you could carry out your task. It's really difficult situation, right? It's helplessness plus scary weather, everything all together, and still doing your job at its best. I feel.
Oh, you bet. Absolutely. So I'll tell you what are the challenges there. I mean, if I may, can I tell you what are the challenges of flying there?
Yeah.
Okay. The first and foremost challenge was the reserve power, the power the helicopter has. Now, how does a helicopter operate? A helicopter throws air down. In simple terms, as a simple explanation, it throws air down and goes up. But when there is no air, what will it throw down? Right? Yeah. So there was hardly any air. So the power available to the helicopter pilot was very limited, very little. So all the actions that any pilot would do had to be very small, precise, and absolutely, there was no scope for error. They had to be absolutely precise. There was no scope for error, because one small mistake and you are crashed. You would crash. This was the most important. This was the biggest technical problem. The other problems were weather. If anybody who's been in the mountains in the Himalayas would know that the weather changes at the drop of a hat. Before you can say Jack Robinson, the clouds come in from anywhere and they just cover up, and then a helicopter cannot fly through clouds because he has to see the ground, and in the mountains they're so close, peaks so high that the helicopter is flying below the mountain. So there is a very high chance of getting into the mountain and crashing, right? So that was another major challenge which was indicated by the weather. And the most important challenge was you want to go somewhere and somebody is trying to kill you and you have nothing to do. So I didn't mention that during our time, like in the 1999, when the Operation Vijay was there, the Army Aviation's motto was unarmed into battle. That means we went into battle without any arms. That means the enemy could fire at us and we could not fire back at him. We had nothing to fire back. We had no weapons or ammunition on us. We just had to go. So it was, I think it was more courageous than anything, because you have to go into the fight knowing fully well that the enemy is going to try to shoot you down, try to kill you, and you can't fire at him back. So unarmed into battle was our motto.
So even the basic ammunition were not allowed in the aviation?
I beg your pardon?
Even the basic ammunition to defend yourself is also not allowed.
No, we used to carry our own personal weapons, but you can't fly and shoot at the same time, right?
Shoot at the enemy, no.
So the personal weapons were when you had when your aircraft crashed in enemy territory, you had at least some weapon to fire. Okay. Otherwise, while doing our duty, we had no weapons to fire, because that was our role.
Yeah.
That was the role. It was not that our country has not given had not given us weapons or we were inadequately. No, that was our role. Our role was to go and pick up our injured soldiers, give weapons to them, place our Jawans at places where we are expecting the enemy to come, and if the Jawan has to go walking or the officer has to go walking, he would take 24 hours or 2 days to go. Instead of that, I can just pick him up from one place with his one Jawan at one time. We have done this. One Jawan at one time with his arms, which is clothes, bags, with his tent, with his weapon and ammunition. Yeah. Take him from 10,000 feet grass and drop him at 18,000 feet or 19,000 feet in 15 minutes, right? Same thing if you had to, and we would do 5, 6, there would be 2 helicopters taking one man at a time, and we would place about 10 or 12 Jawans at one time and officers at one time. And so that they are there at 19,000 feet immediately, fresh for a battle. Means if they have to climb for 2 days and reach there at 19,000 feet after 2 days, they would not have so much energy to fight if they had been taken by the helicopter and ready to fight. I hope you can understand.
Yes, sir. It is very understandable how difficult it is to really cope up with those situations there. Right. So also I wanted to understand, sir, in those areas, it would be very difficult to land the helicopter. So how do you actually take up the soldier, or dropping is still easy. You drop at a desired location, right? But designated location, but picking up the ammunitions and picking up landing would be very difficult. So what is the technique that is?
Okay. So it was not dropping actually. Okay, I'll tell you. When normal circumstances, a helicopter requires an area of 25 meters by 15 meters clear area to land. Okay. In mountains, 25 meters by 15 meters of plain area is extremely difficult to find. Yeah. And not only that, now there's a war going on. So there is whatever place that is available, you have to go there, land, drop dropping does not mean just throwing from top. Dropping actually means going and landing at the helipad or whatever place there is at 15,000 feet, 16,000 feet or 20,000 feet, going there, landing in whatever space. So, and then landing and then dropping the, unboarding the passengers and whatever luggage and taking the passengers back, taking the casualties inside. Okay. So at such high altitudes where war is going on, where a battle is going on, it was not possible to make helipads of 25 meters by 15 meters. So what invariably used to happen, what usually used to happen was they would just clear off an area where a helicopter can land, which invariably would be about 2 meters by 2 meters. That is double the size of your dining table.
Yeah.
And we had to just go on land, make a precision landing at that high altitude, drop, unload whatever luggage we have, unload the men or material that we have, and take casualties quickly inside and get away. Now, when we are going towards the helipad, where invariably the battle was going on about 100 meters away. So the enemy would try to fire at us, and while we are going and while we are coming back. It was just our good fortune that we went
Yeah.
without any fear, went there, landed, and got back.
And that is what the bravery and courage we always talk about, right? Showing that much courage of landings at some place where you are in direct eye of enemy, and fire and missiles can come anytime from there.
I absolutely agree. We were, all of us, all the pilots, all the helicopters were being shot at, and all of us did not care about getting shot at or dying or our helicopters crashing, for a primary reason, because every other soldier, every Jawan, every infantry battalion, every Jawan, every officer there was fighting and was not worried about dying. We all had only one aim, and the aim was to throw Pakistan out of our territory at whatever cost.
Yes, sir. Agree. Sir, did you, I mean, obviously you would have carried the casualties. What was going through your mind when you were seeing uh, like half dead soldiers you're carrying? You don't know whether they will survive. You don't know whether you will
Correct.
survive. Uh, I mean, whether you will go through all these things and take this injured soldier to the hospital or wherever you are supposed to drop. What was going through your mind by seeing all this?
Uh, when well, during the Kargil war was not the first time I'd seen
Okay.
half dead or very badly injured soldiers or jawans or officers. Was not the first time. Like I told you, I'd already flown in Kashmir, and I'd seen a lot of casualties. I'd seen a lot of people being hurt because of terrorist actions, which included shooting them down or IED blast, what you hear, where the whole cars are blasted and the men are badly hurt without them even coming to know. So I evacuated a number of casualties in Kashmir also. Here also we saw the battle, we saw the casualties. The only difference was here, there were two differences. The major difference was that here you knew exactly whom you are fighting. You know who's the enemy, where is the enemy. Whereas when you're fighting insurgency in Kashmir or anywhere else in the world, you do not know who the enemy is. A person who's wearing a firan, or a woman who's wearing a burqa, maybe carrying a weapon inside, or there's a small boy who's been told to throw a grenade at you, who knows nothing about the grenade, who doesn't know what will happen if a grenade is thrown. So, unlike in insurgency, a war I feel is an easier option than insurgency, because in war you know who the enemy is, you know where exactly he is, and you know what he's going to do. You know he wants to kill you. You know he's going to shoot at you. So we were all mentally very well prepared that we have to fight this war. There are going to be injuries. Some of us are going to die. Some of us are going to get injured. We have to do this. And so, of course, one always feels there's a syndrome which is called "it cannot happen to me." It cannot happen to me syndrome. You always feel, "अरे मुझे तो कुछ नहीं होगा," isn't it? You always feel, "पुलिस तो मुझे नहीं पकड़ेगा, दूसरे को पकड़ेगा." Similarly, here also you feel, यार अगर accident होगा, यार if I have to be shot down, it will not be me, it will be somebody else. So that false sense of bravado is what pushes all the soldiers always, that it will not happen to me. I will survive.
Yeah.
But yes, one is always scared, especially when you get shot at. You see the weapons, you see the bullets which are coming at you. You know, when they fire at aircraft, do you know the difference between an anti-aircraft gun ammunition and a normal ammunition?
No, sir.
A normal ammunition is like you just fire. The person who's firing, there's a flash which is there, and the round goes and nobody sees the round.
Right.
In an anti-aircraft ammunition, when the anti-aircraft gun fires, the bullets that are there, they have tracers. So there are lights coming out. So you see the light going left, right.
Yes.
You know, when you see in the movies, you see those when weapons are fired, that is only there for the anti-aircraft gun. So actually, as a pilot, you can see when you are being shot at.
So the
So
list.
that really scares the hell out of you.
Yeah. You're
You
seeing
know, if some,
you're seeing that the bullets are coming to you.
exactly. You are seeing the bullets are going past you.
Yeah.
They're just going past you and just hoping, just praying to God. That is when you remember God. That hope I don't get it.
Sure. It's we can just imagine. It's very difficult to even digest this facts. So, are the aircrafts better now? The capacity of the aircrafts are improving with the technology. Uh, were you happy when the time you retired that at least some improvement in technology had happened and better equipment and better aircrafts were given to you?
I retired in 2010,
Yeah.
and ever since then it's been almost 10 years. It's been 10 years now, and I am very happy that things are changing. Although a lot is required, but we have to understand ours is not a country like the United States or Russia, where we have plenty of money. We can go just have a lot of helicopters and have modern technology and new helicopters every time. But uh, with the present induction of the ALH, the Advanced Light Helicopter, which is manufactured by HAL, and the Weapons Support Integrated WSI, which is like a small attack helicopter made by HAL, which is going to be introduced, things are going to change vastly. Also, we are likely, the Army Aviation is likely to get the Apache helicopters, which are likely to come very soon. That will also change the complete war. That will also change the game.
Yeah.
And the best part that has happened after, and the best thing that has happened after the ALH, the Advanced Light Helicopter manufactured by HAL, has come in, is that now our helicopters can fly at night also. Even in the mountains, they can fly in the night. In 1999, the helicopters were restricted to flight during the day. We could not do any flying during the night. So if there was a casualty, if there was a war going on at night, we could not. We had to wait till early morning, till the sun to rise. Only then we could go and fly. Whereas with the new helicopters in the past 20 years since I've left, 21 years since the war has taken place, uh, things have really improved, and they are definitely will improve.
So Army Air Defense Corps is as good as Air Force. I mean, I just want the differentiation between Army Air Defense Corps is also responsible
Now,
for
are you talking of Army Air Defense or you are talking about Army Aviation?
Army Air Defense Corps.
Huh?
Uh, how different it is from our Air Force? I mean, both are supposed to fight, right, and kill the enemies.
No, no, no. I think, are you talking about, I think you're confused. Army Air Defense is something different. Right now, I'm talking about Army Aviation.
Yes, sir. I got that. My question is about Army.
Air Defense.
Yes.
Okay, okay, okay. Army Air Defense has got a different role. Air Force has got a completely different role.
Okay.
Army Air Defense, the role of the Army Air Defense is in giving the air defense protection to the army units, army battle units, the armored core tanks and the strike formations which go into attack or which are giving this thing. They are the Army Air Defense has got radar controlled guns. It has got anti-aircraft guns and it has got anti-surface-to-air missiles, which are there to protect the army formations from the enemy's air force.
Okay.
The role of the air force is to protect the whole of the country.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
That is
the whole from the air against the enemy air attack. The whole country, our important establishments like Bhabha Atomic Research Center, your important airports, your big cities, your nuclear installations, your oil refineries, their protection, our country's assets, the national assets, the protection of the national assets is of the Indian Air Force. In fact, the complete airspace of our country is protected by the Air Force. The Army Air Defense role is basically is a younger brother of the Air Force to protect the airspace of the war, of the battle zone, the combat zone.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying, sir. These are the layman questions we always have.
I understand. I completely understand.
Yeah. In the beginning, you said that we have our own small air force, right? So this question was wanted to ask that time, but anyway, I got opportunity.
No. This is different. Now I'm talking about Army Aviation. Army Aviation is the Army's own air force.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So the difference again is similar. The Army's aviation is in close support of the Army. Absolutely where the battle is going on.
Mm-hmm.
When the battle is going on and whatever help that is required in terms of materials, manpower, evacuation of casualties, doing reconnaissance. That means if the army wants to make an attack, Suppose they want to attack a hill. Now, from the ground up, he can only see a limited, the commanding officer who's going, or the major who's going to attack. He can only see a small area. But if he goes in a helicopter, goes up above the area and sees where exactly the enemy is, how the enemy is located, it would help him in planning a better attack, right? So that is how army aviation helps the army.
So coming back to Kargil, sir, I want to understand, like Pakistan government released that they did not attack, the Kargil war did not happen at all from their military. I mean, they were saying that we didn't even have an attack on Indian border. So how do you see this, and how do you does your blood boil when you see this kind of press releases? And what, as an soldier, army soldier, what do you feel about it?
Okay, so I would just give my point. As a soldier, what I feel is different, but I will tell you that what the Pakistani soldiers who are actually fighting would have felt when their country says that they are not our soldiers. Can you imagine? What a shame it would have been for those, I mean, how shameful it would have been for the soldier who's fighting.
Correct.
On the contrary, especially during the Kargil war, when it was the first war that was came to everybody's living room on the TVs, everybody in our country saw, and there's so much national pride, there's so much support by our people that the morale of the men who were fighting in Kargil, the morale of the army which was fighting in Kargil was extremely high. Our Indian Army's morale was extremely high. And on the contrary, the Pakistani morale, although the Pakistanis were better placed, the Pakistani army was better placed to defeat us. They were on higher grounds, they were higher. They could even throw stones and hit us and injure us. Yeah. It was taking 2 weeks to capture a small post. Even then they lost. They lost because the country did not support us. And the major part of our army winning the war, our armed forces, I would not say the army, it was won by the army, navy and air force, all the three services. The major contribution was because our nation, our population, our people, our government supported the war. They said what the Indian army is doing is dharma, is doing the correct thing, it is doing the righteous thing. And every man, every woman, every child in our country stood by the armed forces. And I think that was a major contribution in our victory. And that was what made us feel proud of going ahead and fighting for our country. Yeah. And that was the exact opposite case in terms of Pakistan. Although they were very good soldiers, they fought well, but they were not supported by their own country. And that was why they were easily defeated.
Yeah. They did not have the...
Did I answer you correctly, or you had some other question?
Yes. They did not have the support of people of nation and that side, whereas here, the whole nation, even each and every citizen of the nation was with the soldiers. Yeah.
Absolutely correct.
Yes, sir. I want to go back to your first question, sir, where you said that you wanted to join army for pursuing a passion of flying. So I want to tell the parents who are watching this video, watching this live session on Facebook and in Zoom, that what is it that parents should look at while joining army? How do we say that, okay, army is also a good point of career, right? You can choose it. So there are many different courses where students can join in army. So can you put some light on why and how they can join army?
Firstly, I always say that army is not a career. Army is a lifestyle.
But civilians think like that, right? So civilians, what they think is, why my son should go in army?
Yeah, I'll tell you that. Yeah. I'll tell you that. Okay, so army is not a career. One should never join the army because the army pays you well. Army gives you a good house, or army gives you pension. You should not join because of that. You should join. The army is an excellent lifestyle. You are not in the army from 10 o'clock to 8 o'clock, or like a civilian works in a company. He goes to the company at 9 o'clock and is back by 6 o'clock. Some hardworking people are there till 8 o'clock. In the army, you are on duty always, 24 hours, 365 days a week. So it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. I was in the army for 22 years, 4 years of training, and to all the parents and all the young audience, boys and girls who are watching this, I will tell you, I had not even once thought about did I do the correct thing by joining the army? Am I happy? I look when I look back, I do not think that I could have done anything better. And a lot of people say, a lot of my friends say that we gave so much to the army in our youth, or we gave so much to our country. You know, when we joined, we had so much tough training. But I always say that I did give a lot to my army, to my country. But the army and my country gave me much more than what I gave it. I got much more from the army and from my country in terms of everything, in terms of quality of life, in terms of happiness, in terms of everything, in terms of glory, in terms of my dreams coming true, more, more than what I gave to the army.
Yes, sir.
So I would say that army or the armed forces, Navy, Air Force, are excellent choices for any young boy or a young girl. And the best part of the army is it doesn't matter who you are, whether you are from which caste, you are from which religion, you are from what, whether your father was in the army, whether your father was a general, or whether your father was a havaldar, or whether your father was a peon, or whether your father is a rich businessman, or your father is a member of parliament. It really doesn't matter. In the army, you get selected only if you're good. In the army, you get promoted only if you're good. In the army, your progression is only if you are good. It has nothing to do with your religion, your race, your parents, your upbringing, from which school you are or from what you are. So it's a very, very, very fair organization. And I'm telling you because I'm from a very middle class family. I had nobody in the army. I had no support in the army. I had nobody to guide me, but I worked hard. Whatever I achieved because of my hard work. And hard work was rewarded. I put in my best. The army rewarded me with everything. An excellent lifestyle. I got a gallantry award. Everything.
Yeah. That's what, sir. Army always selects the people on the base of merit, and if you are good, you will do good. Be it if you take it as a career, you will do good. If you take it as a lifestyle, you will do good about it. So that's the best part about army, I feel. And you have
Absolutely.
22 years of your life in that. Even if you say that army has not given, I mean, you have not given enough to army than you have got from it, but still I think the officers like your contribution to the army and in turn to the nation is very much valuable, and we as a citizens or civilians, we should always recognize that, is what we always think. And this effort from Shifa Society is all about that, recognizing the efforts of all the not only Jawans who are actually fighting it, but all the officers and of every rank and of every army corps or every regiment in that, for that matter. We want to recognize everybody of them.
I'm really grateful. I'm honored that you called me here, and I'm really grateful the way you think, and may your tribe increase.
Yes, sir. Sir, last thoughts on any message that you want to give to audience or Shifa Society?
I would give a very cliched response or my quote. I said that the army is excellent, the armed forces are excellent, but as a nation, do we deserve these armed forces? As a nation, are we good enough to have such armed forces? So let us, as citizens, as I'm also a citizen of the country. As citizens, let us work hard to make our country great, make our country so good, and let us do good so that we deserve our armed forces.
Right, sir. I agree agree with you on this, that we should deserve the people who are fighting for us. I mean, we should be deserving, right? And we should also
We should work hard. We should be good citizens, and
yes, I agree. Thank you for joining us, sir, for this live session. Now I would give the further control of this session to Harshini. Uh, Thanks a lot for joining us, sir. I want to thank you on behalf of the whole Shifa Society and the audience to give your insight about Army and about your experiences in war. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. I'm honored.
Yes.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir.